My next guest is the co-chair of the Congressional Pro-Life Caucus and a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Here to discuss new legislation he's co-sponsoring to combat human trafficking, as well as the Trump-Russia imbroglio, U.S. foreign policy, and much more. Please welcome New Jersey Congressman Chris Smith, who joins us from Capitol Hill. Congressman, thank you for being with us.
Raymond, thank you for having me on. Great to see you again.
I want to start with Donald Trump Jr., who released this cache of emails this week that has really set fire to D.C. You would swear every building were ablaze the way they're carrying on. He talked about meeting a Russian lawyer. This was a meeting that was set up. And, well, I'm going to play his reaction and then get yours. Listen to this.
In retrospect, I probably would have done things a little differently. Again, this is before the Russia mania. This is before they were building it up in the press. For me, this was opposition research.
Congressman Smith, is that sufficient to your ears? You're a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. You hear that and you think what?
Well, I think, first of all, Putin has taken Russia in a very dangerous direction. We know that there were attempts to influence the election, but that's why we have a special prosecutor. That's why both committees of Congress are investigating to stop with the speculation and the hyperbole and the attacks, and let wherever the truth takes us, take us. So I think the media, and today I'm the sponsor of 4 anti-human trafficking laws, including our landmark Trafficking Victims Protection Act. Right. Today we had a major bill. I've been working on it for a year. And at the press conference with Paul Ryan this morning and Kevin McCarthy, great, and Kathy McMorris Rogers, we talked about the bill, what it will do, how it will assist victims. And the questions that came from the press were all about
Russia,
Trump, and Russia and his son. It's like, is there anything that you want to talk about? Like, we're passing major legislation that will have a profound positive impact on victims. I mean, the Catholic Conference helped us write this. They had major input, USCCB. So it's a great bill. And I don't think anyone's going to cover it from that press conference that we had this morning. Yeah,
well, we'll cover it. And I'm going to get to that in a moment, in addition to some other bills I know you're involved in and other agendas. But the president has dismissed this whole thing, and I sense the frustration in your voice. He's dismissed this Russia investigation as a great witch hunt, the greatest witch hunt. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't use words like that. I think it's important that the investigation be aggressively undertaken, but it better be fair. And I think there needs to be, all those who are doing the investigating need to be on notice that we want it to be done completely balanced. And if there was wrongdoing, then that needs to be held to account. I find it appalling that during all of those years when President Obama had one scandal after another, including the IRS, the other problems that they had, of course, Hillary Clinton, and many of her problems, and there were legion, including Libya, that there, nothing ever came of that. There was no special prosecutor looking into it. But that said, wherever the facts take, Mueller, they ought to take them. But he's got to be on notice. He's got to be fair, and he's got to be, a man of his word that this will be full of integrity in terms of the investigation.
Congressman Chris Smith, as I talk to your colleagues on Capitol Hill and many staffers I know, they tell me they believe that this Russia investigation has really stalled the Trump agenda. Is that your perspective on it? I mean, you talked a little bit about the press conference you had with the speaker. Well, you can't get a word in edgewise because Russia is eating all the air in the room.
Well, there's no doubt that it crowds out discussion in the country because the mass media has a single focus. But that said, we're passing important pieces of legislation on a myriad of subjects that, while they don't get reported on, they're still passing the House. The biggest reason why we are failing to get enactment into law of many of these initiatives, and tax reform may fall prey to this as well, right, is the legislative filibuster in the United States Senate. That's a relic that needs to be jettisoned. They did it for Gorsuch. I think it needs to be done for legislation. Every one of our pro-life bills, from the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act, which would take abortion out of Obamacare and make permanent the Hyde Amendment, Trent Frank's important bill on pain-capable children, right, all the bills, conscience protections, would be passed if we didn't have to rely on 60 votes rather than a simple majority. So the legislative filibuster needs to be jettisoned as quickly as possible and let 50+1, simple majority, except for treaties and other, important issues like that, which are constitutionally prescribed, where you need a supermajority. But everyday business, a supermajority, that's an automatic killer of legislation. We've sent over hundreds of bills in the House that don't get acted upon because of the potential of a filibuster and a process issue rather than a substance issue.
Congressman Smith, I want to ask you about this ceasefire that President Trump and Putin agreed upon during the G20. Now, Ambassador John Bolton has come out and said he doesn't think this deal can stand the test of time because it enshrines Russia and accepts Russia in the region. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think it's, the de facto reality on the ground is Russia is on the ground in Syria. They're on the ground in the Middle East as never before, particularly their relationship with Iran, courtesy of the Iran deal in part, which was an egregiously flawed nuclear deal from the last administration. And they have grown in their influence almost exponentially because of our lack of leadership. I don't know how we don't talk to a major player. When the Balkans War was underway, Slobodan Milosevic, a war criminal who eventually went to The Hague for prosecution, we had to talk to him about peace as well as about things like ceasefires. I remember one time I met with him on the same day that he declared a ceasefire. He didn't live up to it, but there needs to be engagement even with people with whom we have very profound differences and disagreements.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, the people of Syria are suffering horrifically, and they need help. Ceasefires, no matter how hard it is to sustain them, at least allows people to live and for the humanitarian workers to do their good work in assisting those who are suffering from disease and malnutrition.
Congressman, let me know your thoughts on North Korea. We're seeing a very aggressive North Korea. They're firing these intercontinental missiles capable of reaching the United States, perhaps. At least that's the goal. Your thoughts on how we should be engaging them. Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador at the UN, wants more sanctions passed. Are sanctions enough at this point?
I think sanctions are important, and I think the sanctions have to also be levied against the Chinese leadership and businesses that are aiding and abetting the dictatorship in Pyongyang in North Korea. There's no doubt that they are testing. They have military nuclear capability, and they're testing ICBMs. And I think the most underappreciated reality on the ground in North Korea is the deification of the Kims, especially the original founder of that dictatorship. Right. There's a thing called juche. It's not just self-reliance. It's about how someday they want to be with this God who is really a dictator, and they will do anything. And that kind of fanaticism is not appreciated by many policymakers, and it's reminiscent of the Hirohito cult and that drove Japan years ago, Imperial Japan, that is, to covering the 8 corners of the world, as they put it. So I think we have to have a better appreciation of that threat. It's like ISIS, and their radical religious. It's not even religious. It's not godlike. It's just the opposite. But we don't appreciate that for North Korea the way we should, and have an understanding of it the way we should.
I want to move to human rights for a moment, Congressman. There is a congressional movement, it seems, at least 2 congresspeople have advanced the cause, to give Charlie Gard, that little 11-month-old boy, residency in the United States to pursue care. Your thoughts on him, and is that the best step forward?
Well, I think the actions by the UK, by the court, the European so-called Court of European Human Rights, was an abomination to turn their back on a severely disabled child who has the potential of getting life-aiding assistance that his parents desperately want him to have. Right. This is a serious culture of life issue, and I think if he were allowed to come here, and I applaud President Trump for making that overture, that he would be more than welcome to come here and his parents to receive the best of care. And no one knows how long that will help, but I believe it would provide some help. But you don't turn your back on him and abandon him because he happens to be a child with a disability. And that's exactly what the Europeans have done, the United Kingdom in this case, and the European Court of Human Rights. And I think it's outrageous. And it also comports with this movement in many parts of Europe, particularly in the Netherlands and elsewhere, towards euthanasia and the killing of those that they deem to be defective. God and our policies, but God certainly welcomes everybody on an equal basis, loves those with disabilities. Why are they expendable? And this little boy, when I saw those first pictures, when this first broke, my heart broke. And the legislation that would, kind of further facilitate his coming here is very, very humane.
Let's talk about these bills that you helped pass. In fact, you drafted one of them, you wrote one of them, and I know you've been an advocate for all of them. Dealing with human trafficking. The first is Frederick Douglass bill. Tell me what it will achieve. It passed the House. Now, again, it's awaiting senatorial action.
Yes, the legislation was about a year in the making. I had inputs from the Catholic Conference and many other non-governmental organizations that were very helpful. I've written 4 laws to combat human trafficking, including the original Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which established our entire program. This builds on that, reauthorizes it, $534 million over 4 years. It also reauthorizes the International Megan's Law, which we got passed last year. And it also incorporates a lot of best practices, like HHS grants now to teach young people how not to be a victim of trafficking, and also instruct educators, superintendents, teachers, principals, on how to best educate in an age-appropriate way their students so that they're not victims to this modern-day slavery. We named it after Frederick Douglass, who was a Republican, one of the greatest abolitionists of all time. On the 200th anniversary of since his birthday in 1818. He was a slave until he was 20 years old. He escaped, became a great orator, a great writer. I just read one of his books. It was outstanding. So we're trying to honor him and underscore the fact that this is modern-day slavery. There's 3 titles to it. The first is to affect America, because so much trafficking happens here, particularly among our young people, sex and labor trafficking. Second is the international piece. And the third is that authorization of $534 million over 4 years.
Well,
so
I was
a
elated.
Very serious piece of legislation.
I was elated and surprised to see the bipartisan support for this, Congressman, which is something you don't see too much of on Capitol Hill these days.
I think we need to get back to that. Yeah, Raymond, we need to get back to where we can have bipartisanship, and this is one area where we can. We need to do it. And, my hope is that we will persuade those on the other side of the aisle who may be on the other side on the life issue to see it our way by consistently, radiating a culture of life and the fact that human rights is for all from womb to tomb.
Very good. Congressman Chris Smith, thank you for being with us, and get back to those votes. We'll talk to you soon.
Raymond, thank you.
Thank you. That is all the time we have for now. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. You can like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. Be sure to join us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.